The night before the city learned it had become a board where kings and liars played, Eddard Stark sat in the window seat of the Tower of the Hand and watched torchlight creep like red ants along the lower walls. The moon was a thin coin caught in clouds. Somewhere below, in the summer market, someone sang off-key and merry, as if bread were abundant and winter a rumor told by northerners who did not know better. Eddard's leg ached where the horse had fallen on him weeks ago, a mutinous old pain that flared when duty asked him to move. He set the small iron key on the table before him and turned it with his fingertips. The treasury key. The city's ledgers lay open, columns of debt lined like spears. He had hated the count of it. Borrowed gold from brazen hands, interest swollen as ticks. All day he had argued with his own honor. It was as stubborn as a winter wind and just as heedless of men who tried to stand against it. Honor had told him that truth was sufficient, that men would hear proof and bend like reeds before a storm. Caitlin would have told him that truth was often snow in spring, pure, melting at a touch. Robert, God's keep him, would have told him to choke on honor and use the tools the world placed before him, whether clean or not. Above the ledger lay the crumpled wills. Robert's letter naming him protector of the realm until the rightful heir came to claim the throne. The parchment stank faintly of oils and the king's sweat despite the days since its last touch. Eddard had read those words a dozen times, each reading cutting him anew, each time the ink seeming to shift and tighten like a snare around his name. Protector, he thought, not king. And protector meant protecting even those he could not love. He had sent Tomard to find Janos Slint an hour ago. Careful words carried down quiet corridors. No men-at-arms and no heralds, Eddard had said, his mouth withering around the request. Bring him to the tower, this night. Now the bells told the hour and the door side. Tomard entered first, his face a cut of worry beneath a cropped beard gone salt. Janos Slint followed, heavier than Eddard remembered, bulk wrapped as always in a cloak trimmed cheaply to look fine. The gold circlet's weight had never touched Slint's brow, yet the man wore the watch's cloak as if it crowned him. A scowl clung to his lips until he saw the table. The scowl softened into a different thickness. "My lord Hand," Slint said, turning out his hands as if he were an honest trader who had brought onions rather than knives. "You asked for me." Eddard gestured to the table. "Wine." "Always," Slint said, though his eyes were slanting to the ledger and the key. They drank. The wine was from the arbor, pale and smooth. Eddard wished for northern beer in his bones. He could have spoken then as he had spoken 100 times before, as his father would have spoken, as his sons might someday. Instead he said, "You grew up in Flea Bottom." Slint blinked once. I have walked it," Eddard said. "It smells of smoke and childhood. Hard to know if it ever leaves a man." Something flickered in Slint's expression, a twitch across the mouth like a man tasting a pear that had turned brown under the skin. "I made sure it left me," he said. "You have done well," Eddard said. "In a city that eats men and coats its lips with their fat. I do not like you. I do not need to like you. I need you to listen." Slint's stare wandered again to the ledger and the key. It returned a heartbeat later, sharper than before, the woolly softness in his eyes replaced by a narrowness that could not help but count. "I am listening," he said. "There are queens in this city where there should be none," Eddard said quietly. "There are children wearing a claim that does not belong to them. Tomorrow I will go to the throne room and speak the truth. I will present the late king's letter and name the true heir. If you set your men in the hall and at the doors and give the word to stand, this city will pass from a lie to order. I require your watch." Slint set his cup down with a neat click, and the sound was strange to hear from such a thick hand. "You will name Lord Stannis," he said. "It is said you are perverse enough to prefer law to comfort." "Law is comfort when it holds back the tide," Eddard said. "If the children's mother will not bend," he stopped. He wanted not to speak Cersei's name tonight, as if to do so would conjure her scent of lemon and malice. "If there is resistance, your men must keep order. No blood in the throne room unless there is no choice left." "And my reward?" Slint asked, not offended, not even coy. He had the shamelessness of an urchin eating with both hands. If you put a different stag on the banners, what becomes of a watch captain who is seen at the head of it? There are lions crouched in every shadow. They will not forgive this turn. Rewards? Eddard repeated, thinking how that word scratched his tongue. You will have comforts enough. Webs of silk to keep the flies of flea bottom off you. Lands to herd. A different place to sit at council. Slint grunted. I have a son. Then you have a reason not to let this city fall into fire. Eddard reached across the table and laid the key beside Slint's cup. You will have enough to break bread with every day for 20 winters, and enough to hire swords to watch your doors if you think your gold makes you taste good. I will also send 3 of my own men to guard your house, where they will watch the safety of your wife and boy. Think how safe it will make them. A spark of understanding came and flared in Slint's gaze. I see, he said softly, not affronted at all. You want my word, my men, and my neck across the block should your letter not fly. I am offering you a city that does not burn, Eddard said. I am offering you my word that I will not use your son as coin, and I am offering you gold, now, tonight, and more when the sun set. Again and does not rise on corpses in the streets. Slint looked at the key. It was not pretty. Iron stamped with a crown that had grown dull under touch. The girl or the boy? He asked, not looking up. If she resists, do we take the girl or the boy first? Neither, Eddard said, the word like iron. They are children. They are to be taken gently or not at all. If the queen fights, you bind the queen. Any man who harms the children without my word will die for it. That is not a courtesy. It is a rule that will be enforced. Slint prodded the key with a finger and then drew it to him, the way he might have drawn a bowl of stew. Then we have a trade, he said. The throne room will be heavy with my cloaks at dawn, and my men at the doors will keep their heads, unless some peacock in white tells them to lose them. He smirked. Kingsguard. I have seen them hold lances like they were feathers. Feathers do nothing against hunger, my lord hand. I have seen hunger sway good men to wickedness, Eddard said. Do not let it sway you. Slint rose. I am swayed by more solid things. He tucked the key somewhere inside his coat as if it were his heart. Keep those northern men at my house as you said. It would be a comfort. When he had gone, Eddard sat a long while with the wine gone sour in his mouth. He hated himself enough for what he had done to wish to tell someone less stern than the gods. He sent for Varys, though he did not love him. The spider came wrapped in perfume and triviality, and sometimes one needed silk to smooth a knot. You smell of smoke, Varys said in greeting, fluttering down to a stool opposite, and of something scorching and unpleasant. Guilt, perhaps. We played with kindling tonight, Eddard said, too tired for grace. We always do, Varys said, tilting his head. Sometimes it is our own bones. The watch, then, and you hated the taste of it. I hated that I had to feed on it at all, Eddard said. But I will not see the city torn by 2 queens. I will send for Stannis. Stannis? Varys repeated, his lips making the name sound like an instrument plucked too sharply. He will make a new night with his justice, and the light will be whiter and colder than moonlight. And if the queen's claws are cut and all the pretty cubs declawed, the lions will roar from the west. Let them, Eddard said. I will have their pride to eat if need be. I am writing ravens, to Dragonstone and to the great lords who would rather fasten their cloaks to the law than to a capricious boy. I ask only that your birds fly quick and true. They always do, Varys murmured, though not always where their owners think. I am but a humble servant of peace. You are a servant of something, Eddard said. He wrote the letters after Varys drifted away, wrote until the candles guttered and the sky paled. He used the clear hand he had learned in a cold tower at Winterfell, with Maester Luwin's voice correcting him in memory. Stark letters, plain as bread. He sealed them with the dire wolf and felt something like home each time wax hardened against parchment. Then he slept in his chair and dreamed of snow falling through the throne room, quieting everything, making all metal cold to the touch. He rose before dawn, bathed with water that steamed and cooled in the same breath, pulled on a fresh doublet, and fastened a cloak heavy enough to remind him of where he had come from. It made his leg complain. He walked into the waking castle with 2 of his household guard at his heels, Tomard and Desmond instead of 10. He would not make this morning look like a raid. In the corridor outside the Queen's chambers he saw a splash of color. Lannister crimson watching him from the corners, and felt his blood quicken but his face hollow. It had been years since a woman had made him afraid. Catelyn, perhaps, when she lay in childbed and the midwives were not calm, but never for her sake, never because of anything as petty as a throne. In his mind he saw his daughters' faces, one softening to womanhood she did not understand, one still a wolf girl prickling with unspent wildness. Sansa had sent him a letter last night in a neat hand he recognized as Septa Mordane's. She had asked that he be gentle with Joffrey, had written of love and courtesy and the songs that promised they could endure anything if they endured it beautifully. He had not answered. He had put his hand flat on the page until the ink smudged and then let the page dry and told himself he would explain to her with his voice, not with lines that could be mocked and carried to others. The throne room filled slowly, like a lung swelling with bad air. Red and white and gold, everywhere the metals warmed by torches. The small folk who came to gape were held back at the doors. The lords who came to plan were given places near the dais. The small council flitted in and out like beetles tasting different leaves. Ser Barristan Selmy stood near the steps in white, his face composed and the blink of his eye thoughtful. Ser Meryn Trant and Ser Boros Blunt flanked the space below the throne like bored statues. The hound leaned against a pillar with insolence as honest as a kicked dog's snarl. Janos Slynt had done as he said. Gold cloaks ringed the hall, their staves set against the stone with a rhythm a man could march to. They were not subtle. Their eyes were. They moved as one when Slynt lifted a hand or lowered it. He stood near the doors, mouth turned down as if he disapproved of everything in the room but the ceiling. But when he caught Eddard's gaze he gave a tiny nod, a flicker of communion between men who would not clasp hands. Cersei Lannister came in with her children. She wore a gown the exact green of a serpent uncoiling on grass, and her hair hung loose in a way that made some men imagine softness who should have remembered claws. Joffrey strutted almost at her height now, his tunic studded with golden stags that caught the light. He add the mouth of a boy who had been told he would never be corrected. Tommen waddled with his weight still not decided between child and squire. Myrcella floated like a painted moth. The Queen's brother was not with her. Jaime was away, somewhere putting the lessons of his life to use in a river valley that had not deserved him. Grand Maester Pycelle, Varys in silk, Peter Baelish in mocking grey, and Lord Renly. No, Renly had left in the night. Varys's eyes smiled at Eddard. Littlefinger's mouth did. Eddard's leg flared as he stepped forward, and he knew, with the clarity that comes only when a man commits himself to a path, that he was too far along to bear the pain of turning back. He stood on the 3rd step, not too high, not low. He drew Robert's letter and held it where all could see the weight of the Basset seal. "By the king's own hand," he said, and his voice carried. He did not shout. He had learned in the north that when a man must be obeyed, he need not advertise his voice. Gravity obeyed itself. "Before his death, the king named me protector and regent until his lawful heir should come of age. I have the letter and the witness of these men." Cersei watched him with the half-smile a cat gave a dog too old and injured to catch it. "The king is dead," she said. "His heir sits before you. He needs no protector." Eddard felt his throat hollow. He looked down at Joffrey and saw the child he had been when he had found him in the yard, all arrogance and eagerly imagined cruelty. "The king's lawful heir is Lord Stannis Baratheon," Eddard said evenly. "Not the boy you put forward. The matter is simple. The gods gave King Robert dark hair. They gave it to Gendry and to the girl at the armorer's and to every bastard named and unnamed. They cannot give it to a son by another man. This court will hear me, and you, my lady, will be taken under guard until you may be judged. Your children will be treated as children should be." The moment between the words and the movement was an old, familiar space where death liked to come. Cersei's green eyes flared. "This is treason," she said. She made no signal, but Ser Meren moved as if her tongue tugged a string tied to his spine. He took 3 steps with his sword coming free. "Slint," Eddard said. Janos Slint raised a hand. The ring of gold cloaks answered like a net tightening. The nearest watchman caught Meren's sword on his staff. Another rammed a truncheon into his wrist with a sound that was oddly like an apple bruising. Ser Boros bellowed and drew, and 4 men were on him, not graceful but committed. They dragged him down in a tangle of white and dull yellow and curses. The hound did not move. He watched Cersei as if he had been born to watch her, and even his stare had weight. Ser Barristan did not draw. Eddard watched his face. He saw nothing but the slow assess of a man who had given his life to the idea that swords could keep order and keep mercy both in one scabbard. It might yet have come to blood. Joffrey's voice went shrill, like a knife drawn too fast across rock, and Tommen began to cry. Myrcella clutched her mother's hand, and Eddard saw Cersei's nostrils flare like a mare's at a wild smell. He took 2 steps down toward her, each step a hammer on the pain in his leg. "You will not be harmed," he said, low enough that only those nearest would hear. "Do not resist, and you will be shown the courtesy proper to your station. Fight, and my men will do what is needful to prevent a riot. Choose." She chose as he expected. She stared and did not bend. But she did not shriek. She did not claw. She kissed Myrcella's hair and whispered in Joffrey's ear and looked at Tommen with something close to tenderness, and turned to Eddard with her chin high. "You will pay for this," she said, and the calm of the words made them worse. "To gain time for the law, I pay what I must," Eddard said. He gestured. Gold cloaks surrounded her, not roughly, and took her hands to bind them with a length of cloth that had once been a bolt for court gowns. He heard Peter Baelish chuckle, that little knife of a sound. He did not glance toward it. He whispered to Tommen to see Joffrey escorted to a chamber of Maegor's holdfast, to keep the boy's windows unlatched and his table set with sweets, and to keep any knives out of his reach that were not spoons. He told Varys quietly to find the gentlest women in the castle to sit with Myrcella, women with hair the color of summer wheat. He did not trust Varys to choose such women for kindness, but he trusted Varys to see the performance of it. He unfolded Robert's letter again and spoke its words. In the silence that wound around his voice, he named Stannis Baratheon as heir in accordance with the laws that had kept the realm from tearing itself apart longer than it should have had to. He named the day of a council to receive Stannis in state. He dismissed the court. The corridors buzzed like a hive kicked in a boys' game. He walked in it and listened for what sound might climb out of the hum to warn him of a sting. He went to the small council chamber and found Pycelle wheezing as if someone had stepped lightly on his chest. Peter Baelish had found a goblet somewhere. He drank and smiled at the goblet more warmly than at any man. Varys arranged the fruit on a plate with delicate fingers as if arranging troops. "It was very neat," Littlefinger murmured to the wine. "You've a talent for it when you stoop." "I will not be stepping where you've made your way, Peter," Eddard said. "I only call a crooked step straight if it leads back to the road." "Lawyerly of you," Peter said, as if this were a jest of uncommon wit. He let his eyes slide past Eddard to the window. "One hopes the lions remain tame while haltered, but halters can be chewed." "Not if they are salted with gold," Varys said, licking a finger that had tasted honey. "The city is a great beast. Keep its belly from growling and it can be stroked." "The city is 1,000 bellies," Eddard said. "We will open the granaries and ration fairly. We will set guards on the bakers. If the Tyrell ships still sail, we will buy grain." He thought of Cersei's last look, the tightness at the edges of her mouth. "We will keep our prisoners treated with a care that becomes us." Janos Slint is to be thanked later in ways that will satisfy his greed and keep him from imagining he has become the master of the place. "He will be very cross when he learns he hasn't," Peter said. "Good," Eddard said. "Cross men are easy to see coming." He sent ravens. He sent one to Dragonstone with the proofs recorded by Maester Luwin's careful hand, explaining a hair's color with a logic he could not argue away. He sent letters to the Eyrie, to Riverrun, to Oldtown and Winterfell and White Harbor, to Storm's End in case Renly had gone there as a boy runs to his crib. He sent to Sunspear, though he scarcely knew their old wounds. He had learned long ago that war spread like liege wine through a tablecloth whether you meant to spill it or not. He had Varys send private letters by means of Varys' softer couriers, those that did not fly on wing and could be caught and caged by accident. He wrote to Stannis plainly, "Come to the capital. Do not delay. The city is yours by right if by none of the things that softened the heart." He did not appeal to Stannis' hunger for justice. That was like appealing to fire to warm a home. Fire warmed because it must, and it burned because it must. There was no persuasion in it. When the letters had settled in wax seas and the seals cooled, he went to see his daughters. They waited in the solar with Septa Mordain taut as a bowstring at Sansa's shoulder. Arya had a bruise across one knuckle and a look on her face that promised someone would soon learn they deserved it. Sansa rose as he entered, cheeks touched with a burn of color that would have become a woman in her. She looked lovely, and that made it worse. The world had a way of punishing beauty for existing. "Father," she said breathless. "They said," Ser Barristan said. "Do we still? What will become of Joff, of the prince?" "He is not prince," Arya cut in, with the savage satisfaction of a child who has learned someone's favorite toy belongs to someone else. Septa Mordain sucked in air to scold, then thought better. Eddard sat with his aching legs stretched and took both girls' hands so he could feel the greater warmth of their fingers. "Joffrey is not the rightful heir," he said, gently enough to try to soften the blow that must still bruise. "His mother lied to the realm, and the lie could have torn us all. He will be kept safe and fed, and spoken to gently, and not allowed to command men to hurt anyone. Your betrothal, Sansa, is ended." The match made sense only so long as it was between two houses, not between a house and a lie. Sansa's breath caught. She had the good sense not to beg at once. He saw the struggle in her eyes and loved her more for it. When she spoke, her voice was a careful thread. "He has not been kind, but I thought perhaps he would be if taught," she said. "Songs say. Songs were bred by men who fear facing the truth and find it easier to breed lies that sound pretty," Arya muttered. Eddard squeezed their hands until excuses stopped. "You are not to go near the holdfast," he said. "You are not to speak to the boy. Sansa, do not send letters. Arya, do not find some clever way to throw rocks through his window. You will both learn the difference between pity and foolishness, between justice and cruelty. You will also breathe and eat. We will be leaving this city when it is safe to leave it." Sansa bit her lip and nodded. Arya asked, "May I still learn with Syrio? Or will we have to learn from priests now that there's a different king?" "Syrio is allowed to teach you," Eddard said, though he had thought about it. "Tell him to be cautious, but not to be so cautious that the lesson is lost. And save your bruises for him, not for trouble." After he had kissed their hair and left, he crossed the court to where Ser Barristan stood watching the training yard with the gaze of a man who had 8 different memories speaking at once inside his head. "Ser," Eddard said. "My lord," Barristan said a little wearily. "You ask yourself if you have done right." "I ask myself if right exists here," Eddard said. Barristan smiled without humor. "It does. It just costs more than any honest man keeps in his purse." He took a breath as if to gather his courage and his courtesy in the same draft. "You named Lord Stannis. That will be a bitter cup for many. He is hard and straight. You would serve him?" "I would serve the realm," Eddard said. "And I would serve law. When Robert put the crown on, the law had to say yes or it would have split. The law says yes to Stannis, and I will help the realm say yes as gently as it can." Barristan's gaze shifted to the window high on the holdfast across the yard. He might have been counting the iron bars. "I will not be dismissed," he said, answering a question Eddard had not quite asked. "I am sworn to a king, not to a mother." "Then stay," Eddard said, "and keep your eyes on the children, for pity and for justice both, until Lord Stannis comes and makes his own vows to them. If you think any man approaches them with malice, any man at all, you come to me. I will hear it even if I am dying." He thought of his own son with raven-black hair thousands of leagues away on a wall of ice, and the ache of that thought lightened the pressure in his chest where it had built all day. The city found its new balance the way a lame dog finds a way to run. There were stumbles and then a kind of speed. Eddard ordered granaries opened and bakers guarded and prices set and posted by hammer blows on boards where hundreds of hands could read or pretend to read them. He sent men to the docks to purchase grain from ships that had not yet sailed away to fat. Ea pauses. Peter Baelish smiled and found coin that had not existed on the page hours before. Varys drifted from hedge to hedge carrying tidings like dew. Ser Barristan kept the Kingsguard from being fools and cows both. The two in the holdfast grew sullen and moped behind the bars of their own honor. The hound haunted corridors and courtyard both as if trying to lose a scent. Janos Slint strutted through the streets as if he had been born on a horse. His men thumped their staves in tidy rows. More than once Eddard saw the white of a Kingsguard cloak from the corner of his eye and turned expecting to see Meryn and Boros. He would find instead a squire delivering messages, or a woman carrying linen bleached so white it hurt to see it. On the third night, a stone thrown from a crowd struck a baker and split his ear. His blood spattered the face of a boy, who stared at the red streaks with the fascination of someone who had never seen anything come out of a man that color. The crowd surged, the way a sea does when a rock slides under it, and men shouted and a woman screamed and a baby wailed the thin, high sound that is the city's true anthem. Gold cloaks waded in, staves raised, but the press was too close and too many. Eddard grimaced and swung his leg into the saddle. He should not have ridden out. He should have sent men. He found himself on the street regardless, with his guard on either side, and the crowd parting ahead like a wound being cut rather than a wave breaking. He did not shout. He took off his cloak. He thought he saw Slint's face go pale before the blotches returned. He climbed onto the baker's cart and did not wince when his knee went from pain to thunder. He held up his hands and simply stood, letting them look at him. Winter had given him a face that a crowd could anchor itself to. A wind skittered up the street, carrying the smell of flour and the memory of meat. "If he dies," Eddard called out, not loudly but with a weight the crowd felt, "I will set his murderer to kneading bread with his bare back for the rest of his life." A few laughed, sudden and surprised. "You will leave your coin here and take your ration, and not strike any man. If your children are hungry, you will tell the watch captain and he will bring you bread. If he fails, he answers to me. If I fail, you can throw me to this oven and have what justice that gives you." A voice in the crowd, sharp and female, called, "You're from the north. What do you know of hungry children in heat?" The crowd laughed again in that way that can turn into teeth. Eddard found her, a woman with a handsome mouth and eyes reddened by the sun. "I know hungry children wherever they live," he said. "I know hungry children are not fed by men striking each other in dust. I know if you break this city we all starve together. Go to the granaries the watch assign you. You will find bread, and if you do not find it, you come to the tower. My men will let you pass." The woman held his stare a moment more and then nodded, and looked away, and the crowd opened as if her eyes had been the lock. Eddard got down from the cart shaking, and hid it as best he could. That night in the Godswood, under trees that were southern and soft and not at all like those that watched over Winterfell, Varys arrived without seeming to. He wore a cloak the color of dusk. "My little birds tell me the ravens reached Dragonstone," he said. "They tell me Lord Stannis read your letter twice, and then burned a third copy without reading it, as if he wished to punish it severely for being what it was. My birds say a fire danced upon his hands when he did it. My birds are fanciful." "Your birds are children taught to tell tales," Eddard said. "Sometimes true ones," Varys said mildly. "You will make a poor spider if you refuse to admit the web exists." "I am no spider," Eddard said. "If Stannis comes, we will receive him. If he does not, we will hold the city with truth until it chokes us." Varys smiled. "I will hold a fan to your lips and try to revive you if the choking becomes too much. There is more. Renly has fled with the Tyrell rose pressed to his breast, and his host grows like vines under summer rain. Ser Mace puffs himself into a sail and catches every breeze of gossip a man can imagine. Garland Tyrell has returned from speaking to fruit growers as if that were warfare, and the Knight of Flowers speaks to men whenever he is not polishing himself. They speak of how lovely the crown would look on a more agreeable man's head. They ride north, as if a better king lies beyond the next hill. Renly will be received with courtesy if he comes to parley, Eddard said. Not with promises. Courtesy and nothing more. You will not make him King Renly, Varys said, disappointment fake and flowery. One might have thought you would enjoy a pretty reign, but there are uglier stories. Armed riders wearing crimson and mountain sigils burn small holds in the riverlands. Cattle and sons are stolen. No one knows whose men they are. If the lords of the Trident do not bleed, they will boil. My wife's father lies Abed, Eddard said. The ache of Hoster Tully's name a soft bruise. That will not stop him from raging. Robb will call his banners. He is not yet a man, but he will act as one. Lord Tywin gathers his armies downriver, Varys said quietly. If he is stung at court, he will strike in the field. Catelyn Stark has not let the Lannisters forget the debt they owe her for snatching their small lion on a bridge in the Vale. Men have peculiar ways of paying what they owe. Then I must end this quickly, Eddard said. Before my son must become someone he might regret. At Dragonstone, the surf had a darker sound than other seas. Davos Seaworth heard it every night when he lay down on a pallet he thought too fine for him. The sea said old words and new ones both. Come, return, drown, be salt. When the Raven came with Stark's letter, Davos watched Stannis Rhee. Add with a jaw that could have cut a rope. The Lord of Dragonstone had a fire in his eye that he did not call temper. The Red Woman stood behind his shoulder like a wound that would not close. Stark is honest, Stannis said, as if the word were an unpleasant spice in a stew. He has done what I would have done. He tells me to come take what is mine, and he offers me a city he has purchased with coin that cannot be repaid. Honesty is scarce, Melisandre said, each syllable a drop of warm honey, scarcer than kings, scarcer than dragons. Men mistake it for weakness when they cannot afford its price. Davos looked down at his hands, at the stubs where a king's brother had shortened his fingers for a lesson because Davos had saved lives and fed a fortress. Honesty is all we have when we stand before the sea, milady, he said softly. And still the sea takes men. Stannis folded the letter, then unfolded it again, as if he could force it into a different shape by refusing to give it rest. I will go, he said. I will take my ships and I will go. The throne room will smell of my sweat and no other man's. He looked at Melisandre. You tell me the Lord of Light has chosen me. I will take what is due me by law and leave your lord to his mysteries. Your law will be reacquainted with truth and fire, Melisandre said evenly. I care not which name you give it. It is still light. Davos bowed his head but let his gaze slide to Pylus, the Dragonstone maester, who had about his face the expression of men who believe in old gods and old letters and not in flames that talk to women. He caught Pylus's eye, and a look passed between them like a piece of bread shared in a storm. They sailed within the week in a skein of black galleys, sails taut with winds that seemed to come at a word from a mouth that did not speak common tongues. Davos stood at the prow with spray in his beard. He was not yet so fine that salt could not lick him, nor did he wish to be. We go to a city that may not wish to be ours, he muttered to the sea. We go to a man who has given us a favor he meant not to. Do you pray? Asked a voice behind him. It belonged to Melisandre, who had come as if she had risen from the ship's boards. I pray to any god that will have me, Davos said, not embarrassed. When a storm climbs into your lungs, you pray without choosing words. She smiled. The words choose themselves if the god chooses you. I am not picky, Davos said, but I know a good harbor when I see one, and I know a good man when I deal with one. Lord Stark has done what he could without spitting on the law. I expect you dislike him for it. On the contrary, she said, the red in her hair bright even in fog. I like him well enough. He is a man who burns with the idea of right. He does not know it is not his fire to tend. They slipped through the mouth of the Blackwater Bay at dawn on a day when the wind was listless and the water smooth, and the city lay like a sleeping cat furry with fog. Watchtowers piped alarms, then covered their mouths. Eddard's men waved banners white and gray, and Stannis's fleet crept in like a knife offered handle first. On the quays, the small folk stared and ran and stared again. They had not yet decided whether this was a parade. Eddard met them at the docks with the courtesy of a steward who knew the house was not his but had kept it cleaner than its owner liked. Stannis walked down the gangplank with his mouth set the way it would remain when he died. He did not embrace Eddard. He bowed as a man bows when his neck is made of iron and will not bend more than it must. Eddard returned the bow honestly and, for once, did not feel reduced by courtesy. "You have done what I would have done," Stannis said. "We are alike in our manner if not in our taste." "We are alike in that we would see the law honored," Eddard said. "Robert loved you," Stannis said. "Could have been accusation or compliment. I envied you. I still do. Robert loved me because I reminded him of something he used to be," Eddard said. "He loved you because you reminded him of something he should have been. Neither of us gave him what he wanted. He loved others for that." They walked up from the harbor in a line. Stannis, Davos a pace behind, Melisandre on one side with a smile like a blade hidden in silk, Eddard and his guard, and the city that wanted to be fed watching them as if they might carry bread in their sleeves. Varys drifted along the edge of the procession, at once servant and witness. Littlefinger did not appear, which made Eddard surer of the need to lock certain doors. In the throne room, the Iron Throne loomed with its immemorial mockery. Stannis looked at it the way a soldier looks at a siege machine, a thing to be used, ugly, enduring, and unworthy of love. He did not sit. He stood before it and raised his voice so that it struck the far stones and rebounded. "I am Stannis of House Baratheon," he said. "By all the laws of men, I am king of the Undulls and the first men, and I will take what belongs to me. My brother chose men for their companionship and laughed at their vices. I choose men for their duties and mock their virtues. If you were loyal to Robert, be loyal to me. If you were loyal to his lusts, leave this hall." No one left. Ser Barristan knelt first, as if the floor had always intended to receive his knee. The sound of his plate striking stone was a sound Eddard would remember like a tolling bell. Varys dipped his head delicately, as if royalty were a dish he had tasted before and not found too salty. Pycelle creaked backward into a bow that could have been a fall. Eddard knelt and said aloud the oaths he had sworn on another day to another king and meant with the same iron. Davos bowed and did not kneel. He had no lord there but the sea itself. Melisandre smiled at all the bent backs and lifted hands, and her smile was the same whatever the realm named its king. "I name Eddard S. Tark my hand," Stannis said, and the city took a breath. "Because he believes the law stronger than the man who wears the crown. Because it needs to be." Eddard accepted with a stillness he had learned from Winter. Do not speak when the wind is speaking. Later, in the council chamber, he watched Stannis disassemble the city the way a man disassembles a clock he distrusts and intends to clean. "Janos Slynt," Stannis said, and the name came out the way a man says mold. "He and those like him should not sleep easy with coins stuffed in their pillows. We will pay him his price and then send him to some cold place where the air can teach him discipline." "The Wall," Eddard said at once. "He can learn honor where there are fewer places to spend what he cannot help but spend." Stannis's mouth twitched. A smile, if one could call it that, had to fight to be seen there. "You would make a good lord of ruin," he said. "You always know where to put the stones after the gate falls." "Only because I have watched too many gates," Eddard said. Varys snuffed a candle that had guttered too low. "And what of the queen and her cubs?" he asked mildly. "Cersei Lannister will be held until I decide whether mercy serves the realm better than spectacle," Stannis said. "The children will be treated like children. If the queen lets blood, so will she. If she does not, she will go west under guard and leave the city bare of lions. If her father chooses to test us by steel, he will learn what steel is." Eddard found himself tired of making arguments that had the taste of ashes. If Tywin comes to take his daughter by force, the city will bleed, he said. If Jaime Lannister is captured by my son's host, as he may be if the rivers hold out, we will have choices. We can make exchange for the sake of peace. I ask that we keep that door open. Stannis looked at him as if measuring a plank underfoot to judge whether it would hold the crossing. You ask for softness. I ask for calculation, Eddard said. You will not win by killing your prisoners. You will not win by letting them go without a leash. Choose the halter that lets us lead the wolf, not the leash the wolf chews through while we count our principles. Stannis's mouth did not smile again. His eyes did, barely. You are too northern to be sly. It becomes you. We will not hang the children, but we will not pretend their mother's lies made them kings. They will go west when I have finished binding Tywin's hands. Renly came within a fortnight, riding at the head of a river of silks and banners that flashed the roses of Highgarden and the bees of Ashford and the cranes of Red Lake. The boy, no, the man, looked like his brother had in his first spring, when he had been all laugh and clean sweat and the willingness to drink any man under the table. No ghosts clung to him yet except those he put on for fun. Loras Tyrell rode a half-pace to his left with a calm more dangerous than an oath. He wore his beauty like armor and had polished it until it blinded. They chose to parley in the fields outside the Gate of the Gods, where tents sprang like mushrooms after rain. The city watched from the walls, hundreds of faces layered like scales. Eddard rode out with a small escort and the hands badge heavy on his cloak. Stannis walked as if he did not know or care how men ought to behave at such meetings. The wind came from the sea and brought with it the smell of tar and salt and something like coin. Renly dismounted and embraced Stannis without permission. Stannis stiffened but did not step back. "Brother," Renly said. Smile turned up as if it could lower guard as well as set one. "So stern you look, like a maester whose favorite book has been misplaced." "I am the book," Stannis said. "The realm has mislaid me for years. Now it will find me. And the realm will yawn," Renly said lightly. "I am more to its taste." "Sweet is popular," Stannis said. "Sugar rots teeth." Loras's horse pawed, impatient as its rider. He kept his gaze on Eddard, not Stannis. He was too well-schooled to be cowed by a man who had been his friend's enemy yesterday and might be his friend again tomorrow. "My lord Hand," he said, and bow and voice both were perfect. "Your city looks well with the flowers we have brought." "My city looks best with grain," Eddard said. "We thank House Tyrell for their ships and their concessions. Bread wins more loyalty than banners." Mace Tyrell puffed at the back, parting men with his girth. He wore enough cloth of gold to feed a village. "Our gardens are generous," he boomed. "Generosity is our nature." "And bargaining your habit," Eddard said gently. "Let us bargain, then. Renly, you have raised a host against your brother. You have no claim by law. I will tell you so plainly. Lay down banners. Bend the knee. I will ask the king to make you his hand when I die or become too old to feel shame, and to make Mace Tyrell Warden of the South with the dignity he desires. You will have honors, and we will have peace." Renly's smile was real for a heartbeat. Then it went away as he considered what life would be like bent beneath the brow of a man who had never laughed without tasting salt. "Stannis would not make me hand," he said. "That would be your gift, not his." "I would recommend it," Eddard said, "because the realm might die if it must choose between your ease and his iron." Stannis did not let the wind answer for him. "I will not have a turncloak for Hand," he said. "If he owes the crown his sword, he owes me his sword. He will kneel or he will not." Renly looked from one to the other as if this were a show put on for idle children. "Brother," he said softly, with that deadly sincerity he could produce like a coin from behind a child's ear. "You are a closed hand. I am an open one. The people will take what I offer and not count the cost. You could rule with fear. I could rule with love. Why choose fear?" "Because love is for children," Stannis sighed. The man who demands it from his subjects instead of obedience will die like a fool who expects his own horse to carry him for kindness. They went on. They used words because men must. They offered and closed their hands and opened them again. No pact was made. That night, the air in Renly's camp tasted of wine and scented oil and laughter, and the stars were clean. Catelyn Stark watched all this with a stillness she had learned at a different war. Eddard had sent for her with a raven so brief it could have been a cry. Come, speak to the southern lords as a mother speaks to men who have forgotten they were boys. She had come with a small guard and a bigger courage than any of them understood. She went to Renly's tent with Brienne of Tarth at her back. The Maid of Tarth wore armor like a prayer, and her eyes were full of the kind of devotion that has no sense of humor and no safety for those who stand in its light. Catelyn told Renly that the North wanted quiet so the Riverlands could bandage themselves while the men who had wounded them were made to sit in the dark and think about it. Renly kissed her hand and promised songs and patience. Catelyn tasted her husband's exasperation at the back of her throat and asked the gods to fend off what songs could do to men's heads. On the last night, the wind went strange. Melisandre slept in her tent near the royal pavilion with a smile that had no warmth in it and a heat in her skin that could have brought grapes to bloom out of season. Davos dreamed that he was in a cave and the sea had come to fetch him and he had to negotiate with it as with a king. He woke sweating and smelling smoke that had no source he could see. He went out into air as thin as paper and saw a shadow move past the lamplight where no shadow should be. He would not know where it went, not with a man's memory. He would only know where it had been because men began to shout and then to scream. In the king's tent, Renly stood with half his harness on, laughing at some jest Garland had told. Then he stopped laughing and put a hand to his chest as if remembering where his heart should be. His eyes went very wide. For an instant, Brienne saw something move between him and the candle flame that should not have moved, and she threw herself forward like a woman who expects to kill a dream. Her sword slashed through nothing, and he fell as if the tent itself had decided to lower him to the ground in kindness. His blood was not much, too little to be a story, but his stillness afterward was all the story that mattered. Catelyn heard Loras's scream the way a mother hears a child wake in a night she cannot see. They ran. Brienne ran with Catelyn half-dragged and half-carried from the tent while men realized that kings could die with their eyes still open and their mouths still full of jokes. Some stood silent, some cut down those near them out of shock they would later call treachery. Mace Tyrell blubbered like a man who had dropped a platter full of his own pride. Loras knelt in the dirt with his hands in blood and a face that had never imagined this kind of ugliness. He had worshipped a god and watched it struck down behind a curtain. When he stood, he swore he would kill anyone who had had a hand in it. He looked toward the city, and the way his gaze went through tents and men and horses made Catelyn think of oaths that melt brains. She kept running and pulled Brienne with her, and Brienne kept running because Catelyn told her to and she had given her heart to orders that sounded like care. At dawn, a carriage in drab paint rumbled through the gates of King's Landing and turned not toward the tower but toward a modest house near the fish market. Catelyn descended and walked up its steps with her hair awry and her face as sharp as a blade. Eddard met her at the door and pulled her into the quiet, and for a moment they were Winterfell again, whole, before the room filled with duties the way a spring flooding fills the courtyard with melted snow and straw. "Renly is dead," Catelyn said, not bothering with preface. "I cannot tell you how. No man can tell you how. Brienne will say it was sorcery. The Tyrells will say it was Stannis. Stannis will say it was justice. The truth will not change the blood we must mop." Eddard felt something between his shoulder blades that had been tight since the morning in the throne room loosen in a very slow unwinding. He allowed himself no satisfaction. "Stannis will deny he had a hand in it," he said. "It will sound like a man denying rain had fallen on his field. Men will not believe him. Some will swear to him because they must. Others will go home. The Tyrells will go somewhere they can be certain of power. The Tyrells will not serve Stannis," Catelyn said. "They will not have his wife for their daughter, and they will not forgive the taste of what happened when no man was watching. They will marry their rose to a different thorn." "To the west?" Eddard asked softly. Catelyn's mouth tightened. "Tywin has a pit in him. He will swallow it. He will make himself a father-in-law to a boy trapped in Magers by our mercy. Or to his brother. He will find a way to make his gold bind our throats. Eddard nodded. Then we must make our own ropes stout enough to keep us from strangling, he said. Rob. Marching, Caitlin said. And he is good. Gods forgive the world that makes me proud of this. He knows how to slide around a trap like a fish slipping a hook. He will try to take Jaime if he can. He thinks if he has that golden sun, we have a kind of peace. If he does, we have a kind of key, Eddard murmured. He touched her hand. You need sleep. I need you to come home to Winterfell, she said, with the ferocity of the young wife who had spoken to him when he had marched to join Robert. She looked about to say more and then did not. And in her not speaking he heard the names of their sons and daughters as clearly as if she had shouted them. I will sleep when you are safe enough to scold for wasting bread. Rob took Jaime Lannister at the Whispering Wood, or near enough to it for songs to say he had done so. He did it because he listened to men who were not yet fools, because he used the pride of other men like a goat uses thorns, and because he had Tully blood that knew the Trident's many moods. He sent word with a rider who did not whisper because he did not understand the advantage of delaying joy. Eddard held the parchment and tasted the iron in the ink. He sent back a reply in as few words as made a counsel and made a father's love. Treat the prisoner well. Bind him tight not just in rope. Do not seek glory. Seek the end of this. Love, father. He carried the news to Stannis like a man takes a map. Jaime is captive, he said. We have the queen. We have her sons and daughter. We have her brother. If Tywin breathes too sharply, he will choke on his pride and kill a child. He is not so great a fool. We can trade and bind him with vows and with numbers. Stannis did not sigh because he did not like to admit that breath left him more quickly when he was forced to consider the soft rag of mercy. We will make terms, he said. We will make them with a voice that tells the other man he has chosen between drowning and swimming in our river. We will not make them so kindly he believes he can step out onto the bank and dry himself with our cloaks. Eddard wrote the terms and let Stannis add the bite. He offered Cersei and the children back to Casterly Rock under escort by sea, guaranteed safe passage, on the condition that the Lannister host withdraw from the Riverlands, that Jaime Lannister renounce the Kingsguard and take the Black before the eyes of the Seven, that the Lannisters pay a steep indemnity to the Tully lands to rebuild what the raiders had burned, that all Western banners swear again to the crown that would not be theirs any more to manipulate. He added that any violation would lead to the return of war that would not be fought with mercy. He had a mind to specify hostages, then decided it would be too much seasoning for a stew already difficult to swallow. Tywin Lannister took the letter and read it in a tent that smelled of boiled leather and onions. Tyrion stood at his elbow and did not turn his face away when his father's mouth tightened. They want the Rock to be a safer prison than the Red Keep, Tywin said. They want us humbled without being able to show that we were, so that we may pretend afterward that we chose to be courteous. That seems reasonable, Tyrion said. While we pretend at courtesies, our women and children are not at the mercy of men who confuse their lusts with law. I prefer our own dungeons to other men's. Tywin looked at his son. He did not look at him often enough to see that Tyrion's eyes were clever enough to cut themselves if they turned too quickly. Your brother is a fool, Tywin said. He will die before he learns not to be. I will not have my daughter publicly shamed and then thrown back to me like a sack of barley. And I will not have Jaime sent to the snow to drink at a wolf's table. They have him, Tyrion said softly. You may have to prefer the wall to a grave. Tywin did not throw anything. He turned the letter over and over and read it as if it would change. He read it again by candlelight and then with dawn falling pale on the paper. In the end, he did what men like him did when they were forced to choose between pride and strategy. He chose strategy and told himself pride would have its turn later. Cersei said nothing when Eddard came to her cell to read her the terms. She listened. It was strange to watch her listen. It was like watching a cat look at a closed door. Her face was still and her eyes paced. He will accept, she said at last, as if the words were a taste she was judging. He will accept and hunt you in other ways. You will be on a ship before the smell of wax is gone from the seals, Eddard said. You will go west. You will not set foot in the capital again while I am hand. I will set foot in whatever room I please if the floor wants me, she said. Then her voice softened for the first time he had ever heard it soften without some game being played with it. Do not let them cut my son's hair when I cannot see it. I will not, Eddard said, and he knew then that she was capable of love, if in a way that had more to do with ownership than a mother's good heart. He thought of Catelyn binding their son's cuts in the yard. He thought of the way Cersei's fingers had stroked Myrcella's hair even as she spat at him. He would not forget either image. Jaime Lannister sat in a guarded chamber at Riverrun and looked at the wall until he decided he had looked at it enough for it to understand his contempt. When the guards let Catelyn in, he grinned. Lady Stark, he said, I had hoped our last meeting would be more romantic. You had hoped to be free, she said, and she did not sit. You are not. So I see, he said, light as air. Shall we discuss how my life is a coin your husband now spends on bread for peace? Or shall we talk of the wall, which I am told is tall and has no windows with the sort of sills a man might recline on while he watches women wash clothes? You will take vows, Catelyn said, and her voice had rocks under it. You will say words that matter even if you have not allowed words to matter until now. He smiled slowly. I will say anything, he said, if the words keep me alive, if they keep my sister alive, if they let me live long enough to see my father's mouth when he realizes I am more useful a crow than a corpse. The only thing I will not do, Lady Stark, is pretend I did not love what I loved. Your husband may have his law. I will have my contempt for it. She did not flinch. My husband will have your oath, she said. Contempt is wind. It makes noise. The wall steals warmth from men who do not know how to hide from it. He laughed then, truly laughed, and looked younger than he had looked since he put on white. By all means, he said, send me to ice. Perhaps I will become one of your gods. In the great September of Baelor, Jaime Lannister stood with a head that had been shaved too close and knelt and repeated after a septon the words that had formed men for 1,000 years. He said he would take no wife, father no children, own no land, hold no court. He said he would serve and watch and die in black. He did not say anything at all about love. Eddard listened and felt a knot he had not known was his own heart loosen. He did not mistake it for justice fulfilled. It was order and a reprieve. It would do for a season. Cersei and her children sailed from the capital with a small fleet and a larger measure of eyes. Eddard stood on the quay and watched the sails pull and the water chop around the hulls. And he felt the odd emptiness a man feels after he has given a thing away that might have been too heavy to keep. Sansa stood beside him with a white face and a stubborn chin. She did not cry. Arya tried to throw stones, and he took them from her hand gently and gave her a practice stick instead. Ser Barristan stood at his shoulder like a statue made for a better temple and watched the ships with a tightness in his jaw that could have been sorrow or disappointment. The hound laughed once under his breath and walked away as if the morning bored him. On the second night after the ships vanished beyond the horizon, Littlefinger finally came to Eddard with the look of a man who has found himself the last at a feast and is only now noticing there are bones on every plate. You have made the city very dull, Peter said. It is almost like a ledger that balances. I find comfort in that, Eddard said. Of course you do, Peter said. You are the sort of man who thinks sleeping with a woman properly involves a marriage. You will make a poor political animal. And yet here we are. He took a piece of fruit from the table and weighed it in his hand. I had thought you would die on the steps of the throne. Now I think perhaps you will die in your bed of boredom. Until then, you will give the children bread, and the men who pretend to love you will love the ease and call it virtue. Be careful, my lord Hand. There is nothing so dangerous to a man like you as quiet. Go home to your brothels, Peter, Eddard said. There is nothing so dangerous to a man like you as a city that does not require your noise to cover the sound of its belly. Peter smiled like a boy who has been mildly scolded by a loving aunt. He bit into the fruit, and its juice ran down his fingers like something he considered he might sell later. When he left, the room felt cleaner, as if he had taken with him a bit of stained air. The realm did not become peaceful. It became less likely to set itself on fire by accident. The Riverlands began the work of burying what had been knocked down. Robb Stark put off the crown men tried to thrust at him as if it were a cap that did not fit. He kept his words and sent men home and rode his horse like a young man who knew not to race only because he wanted to keep riding. There were skirmishes and some went poorly. Tywin Lannister withdrew west as if his army were a tide that had touched too far and now was retreating to pull harder later. The Tyrells withdrew toward Highgarden with their carts full of promises and their hearts full of songs they would use as knives when they chose. Doran Martell watched with a stillness that had its own gravity and sent no banners north or east. The Eyrie remained a nest for a woman too in love with her boy to let him learn he was a person. Across the narrow sea, a girl with silver hair dreamed on hard ground. Eddard did not know her name. If he had, he might have slept as he always slept, like a man who had left too much undone. He read letters from Castle Black and sent men and coin and listened to Stannis talk about a law not even men had written. He walked the God's Wood of the Red Keep, among trees that did not know the words he whispered to the north. Sometimes he stood with his hand in the fountain until the cold made his fingers ache and call it good. He found Janos Slynt a berth on a ship and a writ ordering him to don black among the Brothers of the Wall. Slynt came to the tower to protest, full of the indignation of a man who believes money ought to buy him safety against consequence. "I served you," he said. "Without me you would have bled out on your principles. Without me." "You served coin," Eddard said. "You served because I asked you to and because your desire for gold and safety met the road the law laid down. I will not have a man like you command in a city where I mean to teach boys other songs. You will find honor on the wall if you look for it. If you do not, you will find cold. I am sorry to send your wife so far north. I will see her housed in White Harbor until a ship can take her to Eastwatch. She will have a warm bed and food. You will have your choice between warm clothing and warm understanding." Slynt stared at him like a man who had found a bone when he had expected roast pork. "You are not the man I thought you," he said. "I am exactly the man you thought me," Eddard said, and signaled the guards to escort Slynt out before resentment burned to stupidity. When the first snow fell in the far north, Jon Snow wrote a letter. It did not say much. It said, "Father, there is a thing in the woods that has fingers made of night." It said, "Father, the Lord Commander sent me beyond the wall and I stood on a ridge and looked at a camp that had moved like a patient hunger." It said, "Father, if you had told me that the world is stranger than crows can count, I would have believed you." When Eddard finished reading it, he held it too long and then reread the part that simply said, "Father." He brought the letter to Stannis. The king read it without an "why" expression at all. "We will send men," Stannis said. "Not as many as he wants, but more than he expects." "He expects nothing?" Eddard said, and felt the old, keen love twist like a blade through cloth. "He expects we will do what we can, and that what we can will not be sufficient to what the world is asking." "Then we will do more," Stannis said, as if the answer were arithmetic. "Because if we give the north to ghosts and their cold, we will have built this house on sand and told ourselves we had found stone. Send your letters. Muster men we can spare. If the Tyrells make lace and hang it on their halls to spite us, let them. Lace catches fire more easily than wool." Eddard nodded and set to writing again. He had never written so much in his life. He had never killed so few men with his own hand. He did not know whether the gods looked on him with favor or boredom. He slept better some nights and poorly others. He trained with his men at dawn with wooden swords that bit enough to remind him his body was not a hall he could abandon. He visited Sansa's chamber and watched her draw with a steadier hand than he had known she had. He watched Arya cut the air and laugh when Syrio put a stick between her ankles and she hopped it like the game she had once played in a courtyard full of snow. He saw Catelyn's hair begin to gray at the temples and loved it fiercely, as if he could pull her home with desire. One evening, when the sky went the color of a bruise and then faded back to a plain skin, Eddard stood before the window in the Tower of the Hand again with the ledger closed and the key resting beside his hand. He heard the city. It was quieter, still cried, but it did not scream every night. He thought of a throne made of swords that had been melted by a dragon's breath long ago and would someday be melted by something else. He thought of a man of iron sitting in front of it who could not be melted easily, and of a boy of iron at the world's top who would be asked to the point of breaking. He thought of a woman across the sea with dragons in her dreams, and of a letter from a son who had found that the dark did not go still when a man wished it to. Peter had told him quiet was dangerous. Perhaps it was. Eddard would take quiet as a battlefield if it meant he could count his heartbeats and know to whom they belonged. He had bribed the watch. It had bought him time enough to place law where it needed to sit. He had sent a woman he despised back to her family rather than kill her, knowing her father would think him a fool and repay him later when he could. He had given a golden knight a black cloak and told himself it mattered. He had made himself the sort of man who did not close his eyes when a priest spoke vows. He had not been able to give his honor a pure home. He had made it a room in a dirty city and kept washing its floors. He went out to the yard before the last light sank and found Ser Barristan there, alone with his helm under his arm. "The wall will need men," Eddard said. "It always does," Barristan said. "It always will." "I will send more," Eddard said, "from men who wore gold when they should have worn black." Barristan smiled, faint as dust on a blade. "You have become an efficient man," he said. "I have become a man who expects winter to be long," Eddard said. They stood without speech as the torches were lit one by one along the outer walls, and the city took the small comfort of fire against the belly of the night. From Maegor's holdfast the last echo of a child laughing drifted, as if a ghost remembered that there had once been joy there, and let the wall hear it. In the bay, water slapped with the way a patient woman slaps dough. Somewhere in the towers of the great September a bell sounded for a prayer that men would make whether they meant it or not. In the morning, ravens would go north and west and south, and boys would climb ladders to paint over marks left on shops by men who had been angry and ashamed for not being able to name it. In the houses near the fish market, women would argue the price of salt and then hand each other the same crust, half each. In a tent on the Blackwater, a woman in red would smile at a flame that told her different stories than the ones men told each other. In a hall in the west, a father would teach himself to wait without turning to stone, and a girl with hair like summer would stand on a balcony over a sea she did not yet understand. On a wall too high for any song to do it justice, a boy with a dark head would learn which steps to avoid in the night when the wind pushed snow across tracks made by things that did not bleed. Eddard Stark went inside, left the key on the table, and sat with his legs stretched in front of the fire until the ache became a kind of companionable creature at his side. He closed his eyes and heard Winterfell in the crackle. He was not there. He felt it still. He thought of his honor again and felt for the first time in months that it had not abandoned him, only learned a different gait to keep pace with the world. He was too tired to count his choices. He would choose again tomorrow when the city woke and asked him to. He did not pretend it would thank him. He did not need thanks. He needed the city to remain standing when the cold came down from the north like a hand closing. He had bought time with coin and with things he would not have sold before. It was not the sort of trade any good man liked. It was the trade that kept breath in a realm that still had children living in it. He let the thought warm him like a small fire, and did not ask whether the wood would last until spring. He knew better. He would go on finding more to burn. He would go on. The morning after he let the ache sit beside him like a patient dog, Eddard Stark woke with a stiffness that made the world seem carved from old oak. A thin light came around the shutters, the color of diluted milk. He stood and bathed and dressed. Ed according to habit rather than desire. The air in the Tower of the Hand tasted of clean ash. When Tomard brought bread and cheese and a strip of ham, Eddard ate without appetite and then went down into the day, into its thousand demands, the way a farmer goes to his field even when the sky suggests rain. In the small council chamber, the air had a sweetness in it, faint and unnerving. A small brazier burned a pinch of resin in a dish. Varys drifted about it like a moth that had learned not to singe itself. Pycelle wheezed. Peter Baelish sat with a page of accounts and a pen that wrote a little faster than his mouth. Stannis came late, walking like a verdict. Davos Seaworth followed with a sailor's slow, sure tread, eyes taking the measure of every hinge and latch as if a hold might give. "We will begin with food," Eddard said, when they had taken their places. How much is left of what we bought? How much has the city taken? How much can the city be made to endure? Peter lifted his pen as a smile. Our granaries have become shy carts. They prefer to be coaxed. We have 6 weeks of grain at present consumption, perhaps 8 if we salt down the appetite of the street. We have letters from the arbor and from Old Town, which say everything a merchant's letters say, which is that a merchant loves coin and will kiss any lord's ring to get it. We have a Tyrell fleet that went home when its master went home. We have a red wine fleet sniffing out profit. We have hungry men who can be distracted by talk of justice but cannot be fed with it. Stannis's eyes moved to Varys. Speak to me of justice that feeds. Varys lifted a hand to catch a mote of ash. He let it fall. The bakers are guarded as the hand commanded. Thieves have learned to take a loaf and leave a loaf. Our men have taught them delicate manners. There are 1,000 small compromises a city makes when it wishes to flatter itself that it has become decent. The watch presses men less hard. Men press their neighbors harder. The gods are petitioned. The faith is pleased to be petitioned and displeased to hear of fires and foreign prophets. Stannis's gaze did not sharpen. It did not need to. It had been forged sharp. I did not bring a prophet to the city. I brought a priestess to warn me. If the faith does not care for warnings, it may look to its own candles and see how little light they give. Your Grace, Eddard said, keeping his tone low enough that the word did not become a bell. We will not burn icons in the great September. We will not burn men on R'hlloreth's altars while I am hand. If you ask it, I will lay down this chain and go home. I did not buy this city a short peace to see it set aflame for doctrine. Stannis looked at him, and what might have been irritation in another man was simply consideration in him. I have not asked you to lay down anything, he said. I have asked that the realm obey the law. It will not be made to say a prayer it does not mean. Good, Eddard said, and the word loosened something behind his ribs. Varys, send word that the High Septon is to attend us at noon. He will hear it from our lips and not from men who prefer to sell outrage at a markup. Pycelle made a noise that might have been assent or phlegm. Davos stood with his hands folded, gaze lowered as if counting his own fingers to see if they were still where they belonged. When Eddard caught his eye, the smuggler's mouth twitched. They had the ease of men who had looked out from the same ship at a sea that was not friendly. Another matter, Eddard said. The wildfire. Peter's pen stilled. Ah, he said, in that tone he used when a conversation turned from talk of pretty thieves to the discovery that the pretty thieves had also been murderers. You have been speaking to Haleen the pyromancer. I have been speaking to any man who has the word fire in his title, Eddard said. We will inventory every cache beneath the city. We will close and seal any that cannot be inventoried. We will thin what stores can be thinned. I would rather pour that filth into the sea and drown 100 fish than discover in some ugly hour that we sleep over a dragon's piss. Appoint men who will not be bribed to this. If there are not enough men in the city who cannot be bribed, find children with honest faces and give them a badge and a stick and put them outside the doors and let them watch who goes in and comes out. I will handle Haleen, Peter purred. He has a fondness for dry compliments and for being told he is feared. You will not handle him alone, Eddard said. Ser Barristan will accompany you. If he smells a trick, he will not leave your side until he has seen the end of it. Peter's smile thinned. It never left his face entirely. It could not. Of course, he said, as silk shreds under a blade. I am always delighted to be escorted by honor. Janos Slint, Stannis said flatly. The city will not suffer him a day longer. He is on a ship, Eddard said. He and his coin are going north to learn the difference between duty and appetite. He will command no men in this city again. You do what I would have done, Stannis said. It is tiresome to have to admit you did it first. Your Grace, Varys murmured, lips curving. You might find yourself happy in the north. Men there are too embarrassed by flattery to enjoy it and too stubborn to be bribed with anything simple. It will make your discomforts regular. The High Septon came at noon with a procession that smelled of incense and self-importance. He was a great man wheezing under the weight of his own robes, cheeks like dough left too long by a hearth, eyes that had seen too much blood and had decided to pretend it belonged to the gods. He peered at Melisandre when she came with Stannis and looked away fast enough to be a flinch. Melisandre smiled and let her gaze return to the candle flame in the chamber, as if it were the only face she had come to see. "Our gods are sufficient," the High Septon announced after Eddard had spoken without ornament about law and mercy and the city's exhaustion with spectacle. "We do not require foreign fire. The gods are what men make of them," Melisandre observed, as if she were correcting a student's bad memory. "Flame is neither foreign nor local. It devours. I teach the king to respect it." "You will not set a single altar alight in our houses," the Septon said, red-faced. "You will not preach your blasphemies in the streets." "Peace," Eddard said, the word like a hand on a boy's shoulder. "You will not burn statues. You will not force prayers. You will not turn men from their gods in their own septs. You will also not tell the king whom he may have at his table, so long as those he brings do not break our peace. If you attempt to rouse the city with fear, I will have your priests quieted. If you ask for bread, I will see that the ovens are warm." The High Septon stared at him as if unused to the sensation of being spoken to as if he were made of meat. At last he made a small motion with his hand that meant assent if viewed from the right angle. "The Seven watch," he said, and lumbered away with his train of bells and feathers. Stannis stood so still he might have been carved. When the last acolyte had waddled out, he said, "You give him too much." "We give him exactly enough," Eddard said. "You do not want the city's priests hungry enough to look for their supper in your throat." "I do not want the city," Stannis said. "I want the realm." "Then you will endure the city," Eddard said. "It is where the realm gathers to make mischief and law both." Outside the tower, Sansa walked beside Septa Mordain down the lane that led to the kitchens. The morning's bread was still warm in the baskets the boys carried. A girl with hair like old amber reached for a loaf and pulled her hand back in the same movement, ashamed of her impulse. Sansa put a roll in the girl's fingers and did not wait for thanks. Courtesy was a shield some days and a splint others. She had not cried when the ships went out with Joffrey aboard. She had lain quiet and looked at the ceiling and thought about the parts of a song a singer did not know he was singing. She delivered bread and learned the names of streets she had been carried through in litters. She wrote letters she did not send and folded them into tidy squares and gave them to a small brazier in her room when she needed to watch words turn to smoke. Arya made circles with her stick in the yard while Syrio Farrell watched with the gentle severity of a man who was teaching her to live. "There is the water, little cat," he murmured. "Your knee is a wave. Your wrist is a fish. Your eyes do not look where your hand looks. You already know that. Now you learn to do it when your breath is hot and your arm would leave you if it could." She grinned through sweat. "You talk like father," she said. "I have met your father," Syrio said. "He talks like me." Then he flicked her ankle with his stick so quickly she was on her back and grinning up at a square of sky the color of old steel. At Dragonstone, Celis Baratheon prayed to a god she thought had at last given her husband the world through the fire she had worshipped since Melisandre told her that flames made a better mirror than water. She had written to Stannis in a hand so neat it seemed carved, "Come to your true faith entirely. Burn the false gods. Burn the carved trees. Burn the men who pretend virtue while they cling to old superstitions." He had written back, "I will burn nothing that will set the realm ablaze." Celis wept in anger and then comforted herself by ordering the sept on Dragonstone stripped of its finery and the carved faces hacked. It made a fire that took all night to die. The wind brought the smell of it to the sea. Cersei Lannister's rooms in Casterly Rock had windows that looked down into darkness and up into light. The rock was a city turned inward, filled with gold that did not glitter because it had grown used to itself. She walked its corridors as one walks a former lover's body, alternately disgusted and taken with surprise by old pleasure. She had never forgiven the rock for being her father's, not hers. She had never forgiven King's Landing for showing her what a city could be when it was in love with her. Joffrey threw a cup at a servant on the third day and Tywin took the boy by the back of his neck and shook him once. Not hard, just enough to jar his thoughts in their sockets. "You are not a king," Tywin said conversationally, as if discussing a horse's teeth. "You are a boy in my house. You will not throw cups. You will not talk like a baker's brat. You will not harm anyone I have to look at afterward, because I will not have to correct you twice." Joffrey's lips trembled and then pressed together in a line that promised later cruelty. Cersei stood watching and felt a heat rise behind her eyes that had nothing to do with shame. "He is a prince," she said. "He is not," Tywin said calmly. "And even a prince cannot throw cups at my servants and expect to keep all his fingers. This family will be disciplined. We will wait. We will do nothing that cannot be undone. I will not give Stannis Baratheon an excuse to call me rebel while he feeds my grandchildren from our own larders." Tommen stood in the doorway holding a wooden horse, the string of its bridle twined in his fingers. Myrcella stood beside him with a slight frown, as if learning a new tune and not yet certain she liked it. Tyrion watched from a chair with a cup of watered wine and an appetite for honesty he had learned to disguise as jests. He lifted his cup politely when Cersei's gaze found him. "Mother of the Year," he said. "If there were a contest, you should enter. I imagine you could find a way to cheat and still tell yourself it was fair." Cersei smiled at him without showing teeth. Later she drank until the room steadied and then wrote a letter she did not send to her brother in the Night's Watch, because she preferred to think of him there with a sword and contempt rather than imagine him dead where she could not see the body. She slept badly and woke earlier than she wished to and told herself she would not take rest until a different boy with a crown sat on a different chair. Tywin called for a quiet supper with Mace Tyrell and Loras and Lady Marjorie when the Roses came back to the west to water their pride. They ate sweet fish and butter and some dish too clever with lemons. Tywin spoke of weather and roads as if these, not pride and insult, made kings fall. Mace puffed and talked of honors as if they were pastries to hand around. Loras watched his sister's face. "Your son," Tywin said mildly, "is very young, Lord Mace. Your daughter is adorned by virtues a queen should have: beauty, courtesy, a well-trained mind, a knowledge of how to make men behave for the pleasure of it. My grandson Tommen is also young. The world prefers young things when it wants something new to look at. The crown is not in our possession, but a wedding is not a crown. It is more like a friendly rope." Marjorie's eyes did not flicker. She was very good. She would have been good no matter which king had chosen her. "It would be a friendly rope on which we tie a great deal," she said softly. "Tommen is sweet." "Sweetness is sometimes a fault," Cersei said. "Not in husbands," Marjorie returned, and in her smile there lived both kindness and calculation. The only mix that kept women alive where men wrote the laws. Tywin watched the exchange and counted without moving his lips. In the Riverlands, the scars left by Lannister and Mountain brigands looked old already, as wounds do when they have stopped weeping blood and begun to suppurate dignity. The Blackfish rode out with Robb to look at the burned farms and consider what could be spared from stores. Edmure sat his horse with pride tucked under his buttocks like an extra blanket and tried not to speak too much. "Winter feeds men less well," Brynden Tully said bluntly. "We should send bone to King's Landing and keep meat here. The Hand has sent us coin as if it multiplied on trees. We will send him courtesy and lists and the better half of our oat harvest. We will keep the barley. The river survives because it adjusts." Robb listened and nodded and did not let the praise given him sit on his face where he might get used to the feel. At night, he wrote to his father the way boys write to men whose hands taught them which end of a knife to hold, sure and sometimes shy. He told his father that Walder Frey had been almost polite and that the twins smelled of boiled sheep and compromise. Catelyn visited Jaime in the chamber where light crept through a narrow window like a thief so well-bred. He never took more than he needed to maintain his style. He sat with his wrists unbound now because he had learned not to test the edges of his leash. He had been shaved and washed and given a tunic a squire could wear without shame. He looked younger and no less dangerous for it. "Rejoice with me," he said when she entered. "It turns out I am capable of wearing black as well as any color." The Septon watered his vows with tears and told himself he had done a thing to make ballads weep. "Your son glowered. It must have been very grim and handsome. I would have glowered too if I had had the right face. You will leave for Eastwatch tomorrow, Caitlin said. You will not speak on the road. You will not test your guard's humor. They will arrive with you at the wall. I would like them to arrive with their tempers. He stretched, bones cracking delicately. Ah, the East, he said. So few cathedrals, so much wind. The wind is better company than you deserve, she said. And for the first time he laughed without bitterness, as if she had surprised him. The next morning, he rode out with a small column of men chosen for their deafness to flattery and their delight in duty. Sir Helman Tallheart went at their head, a grim slab of a man who had the sense to leave a jest where he found it. Caitlin watched them go and thought of ships that were not hers receding and of children she could not keep from becoming their father's sons. At the wall, Jon Snow read the letter his father had sent and rubbed his thumb over the words until the paper had the polish of leather. When the ravens came in the cold dawn and croaked for food, he fed them and thought of a mother's name he did not know. The Lord Commander looked at him over a bowl of something that had once been broth and said, Your father is hand to a man who thinks the world is a set of rules. That is better than a man who thinks the world is a feast. But it is still a belief that can get men killed. Yes, Lord Commander, Jon said. He thought of the thing that had reached through wood and skin both to rip at him and whispered no word. He thought of the girl whose red hair had made him think of small fires in dark places, and of the way pity and contempt wrestled inside him when he looked at men who had become motley creatures after winter had eaten their meat and left their bones behind. When the column from the Riverlands came, he watched Jaime Lannister ride in with a half-smile and an empty scabbard. The man's hair had been cut too close, and his neck looked too long without a golden mane to armor it. Jaime looked around at the wall as a man looks at a colossus he used to think was a tale told to frighten children. Then he laughed under his breath as if the joke were on him and he liked it. So this is your temple, he said to Jon by way of introduction, because the old bear pushed Jon at the task of showing the new crow where the latrines were. It's ugly. It works, Jon said. That's more than you can say for most temples. True, Jaime said, cheerful. Most temples house gods. Gods are worse company than men. Men at least know when they are lying. Jon looked at him and hesitated and then said, And do you? No, Jaime said easily. That's why I will be interesting here. I will find out. Ser Alliser Thorne sniffed disapproval so loudly men could have ridden to it. We are a haven for criminals, Lord Snow, he said, when Jon brought him the news of a knight with a past who was supposedly sworn anew. Not for knights who have discovered they are mortal. He took the black, Jon said. His vows are as binding as yours. His face is binding, Thorne said. It binds fools to him. That is a danger. This wall has a way of humiliating men who cannot bear it. I approve of that only when the wind is strong enough to carry away the stink. Jeor Mormont kept Jaime near his own hearth the first winter night, and the talk between them had not a drop of wine in it. Jaime told him what it felt like to kneel in the great September, and he did not lie. Jeor told him what it felt like to bury a boy who had lied to himself, and he did not water the truth. In the corner, Samwell Tarly ate carefully and tried to make himself invisible and failed, as was his way. Jaime smiled at Sam as if he recognized a younger brother in him and did not mind the resemblance. At Eastwatch, Cotter Pike stood on the wind's bad side and spat into a gale that had been born hating men. They're massing, he told the messenger in a voice that sounded like ice cracking on a pond. Mance Raiders got every wild dog in the north on a leash, and some of the dogs can talk. It'll be a push. You tell your king that if he gets romantic about the frost, I'll tie him to an oar and he can row back to his city. The rider laughed until he realized it was not a jest. Then he saluted and turned back south with his horse's tail streaming like a rag grabbed by the sky. Eddard read the message from Eastwatch and wrote another to Stannis in a hand that had grown more impatient and neater at once. He wrote, If you must go, go with enough men to make the difference and leave me enough to keep the city quiet. Bring ships, bring iron. Leave your zeal in its box. Winter does not listen to sermons. Stannis did not reply with a proverb. He closed his hand and made a choice. The docks teemed with men putting aboard enough salt pork to make pigs a northern saint. Davos was everywhere at once, his voice a quieting lantern. Melisandre watched the masts as if they were candles waiting to be lit. "You will come with me," Stannis told her. "You will go where the fire tells you," she said. "It tells you to the dark. I go where my God teaches me the dark is a rumor." Davos smothered a grim smile and went to check the lashings on the big galley's aft anchors. When Stannis departed, the city sagged and tightened in the same motion, the way a house sighs when a father leaves and the eldest son is left to keep the roof beams from creaking. Eddard stood on the quay and watched the fleet diminish to a drawn line. He could feel how the chain about his neck had grown heavier. It seemed to have doubled in links while he watched the sails. He turned back at last and found Varys at his elbow like a shadow that had learned to wear perfume. "A pity," Varys sighed, "that the king did not ask for your leave." "I would not have given it," Eddard said. "He is a king. Kings like to be obeyed," Varys murmured. "Honest men confuse them." Eddard sent for Jacelyn Bywater and handed him a paper that put the city watch under his command with terms that left no room for misunderstanding. Bywater's face did not change. His eyes did, a little, as if someone had put a clear flame behind them. "You will not sell this command," Eddard said. "You will not use it to fill your house with silver while gutters run red. You will keep your men from raping, from taking, from swaggering. If one of them becomes too big, I will break him over your knee." "I have little interest in silver," Bywater said. "It's heavy. It slows men down." "Good," Eddard said. "Carry that interest to your men." He ordered the dungeons inventoried and found a black-eyed man in a cell too clean, with chains too new. When the jailer squinted over a list and shrugged at a name that had no house beside it, the man smiled with no mirth and said in a voice as polite as a new knife, "Jaqen Hagar, if it please." "It does not please," Eddard said, and looked at the man until the man looked away. He told Bywater to send the nameless prisoner with the next party of recruits bound for the wall under Yoren's eye. He did not like the smell of the ropes in that cell. He had a quiet hour in the God's Wood that afternoon, under trees that would never grow faces and never bleed when cut. He knelt and said the words he had learned as a boy to the cold that had trained him. The quiet was broken by Arya creeping in with a look that said she had come by stealth because she could not bear to arrive as if invited. He beckoned. She came and sat cross-legged beside him. "Father," she said without preface, "someday I want to go where the water is very cold and fight people who think knives make them invincible." "The North," he said. "Good. There will be work." She grinned. "There always is. I like work. Does that make me bad?" "It makes you my daughter," he said, and felt the old, raw tenderness pull at him like a rope that did not chafe because the hand holding it was his own. That evening, Haleen the pyromancer stood sweating in the small council chamber with a ledger so old it had eaten 2 generations of clerks and had the ink stains to prove it. Ser Barristan stood at his back, the visible promise that silliness would be corrected forcefully. Peter read the entries and made little sounds of appreciation as if he had been given an especially clever bawdy song. "We have," Haleen quavered, 2,000 jars in safe keeping under the Guildhall and another 500 in subcellars beneath. "Under the city," Eddard cut in. "You store madness under the feet of children. You will. I'll bring 1/3 of those jars up and destroy them under watch. You will pour them into pits in the yard until the smell makes you wish you had never been born in a city. You will do the same next week. And the week after. In 6 weeks this pitiful science of yours will be a story old men tell to frighten girls into behaving." Haleen bristled, which was absurd. He bristled like a hog in a velvet cap, then quailed when Barristan's hand moved and did not rest again until it was clearly empty of sword. "As you command," he breathed. "You will come to love dullness," Eddard said. "It will make your old age possible." That same week, a cloaked man came to Davos's house near the tourney grounds, and Davos let him in because he had learned to trust the way some men held their shoulders, which betrayed either conscience or burden. The man removed his hood and proved to be Gendry. the smith's apprentice with the bull's head hammered on a helm who had Robert's face turned down onto a lower anvil. He held his hands as if afraid his palms would damage whatever they touched. "I was told you were honest," Gendry said, and the certitude in his tone made Davos wish the world deserved it. "They say you came from nothing and remembered the price of bread." "They say many things," Davos said. "Some even true." Gendry licked his lips. "They say there's a boy in the Stormlands with a name that is not his father's. They say there's a man in red that eats boys like that and spits their stories into the fire. Is it true?" Davos did not look around at the walls to see if they could keep secrets. He knew walls did not keep much. "There is a boy named Edric Storm," he said. "There is a woman who would have him bled because it gives her power she thinks is holy. The king would not ask this, I think. The priestess would." Gendry breathed out through his nose, as if the thought had lifted weight he had not realized he was carrying. "If they come for me," he said, "I'd like to be somewhere they can't find me. I'd like not to be a prayer." "You are a blacksmith," Davos said, with a gentleness he would not have shown a lord. "Be iron. Iron can be shaped without being consumed. I will speak to the hand. We will find a way to put you where men see your work and not your blood." Eddard put Gendry into Tobomot's establishment officially, not as a favor but as a contract, and kept 2 of Bywater's honest men near the forge who had the sense to pretend they were there to watch the street. He wrote to Storm's End and received back a letter sealed with a defiance that could not conceal fear. Ser Courtenay Penrose wrote, "The boy is under my protection. I will not yield him to any god that burns children. If the king demands him, he must come himself to fetch him." Eddard read the letter and took it to Davos because he half suspected the man would have done so without him. "Ser Courtenay is a man," Davos said, simple as stating the hour. "He will die for that fact. We will help the boy leave before he does." "You will smuggle him?" Eddard said, very quiet. "I will," Davos said. "You will do what you must afterward. I will not have a hand in a boy's blood when I have my own to account for." Eddard nodded slowly. He wrote to Courtenay again, and this time gave the letter to a man without a name, one of Varys's little birds grown into a larger plumage, and days later a ship slid from the shallows beneath Storm's End at night with a single lantern low, and in its belly a boy slept with a hand tangled in the hem of a cloak he had been told belonged to a father neither god nor king had known how to keep. When the Red Woman came to the fortress and found no boy, she smiled and lit a candle and looked toward King's Landing and said to herself, "Not yet." At Pike, Balon Greyjoy stood with his hair whipped across his face and gathered his family to him like a net. Asha came because she believed nets were for fish and she was no fish. Theon did not come because he sat at Winterfell and ate with Bran and wrote careful letters to a father he could not decide to love. Balon watched the tide and listened to men who wanted to be lied to. "The wolves have turned their heads south to howl at kings," he said. "The lion licks its own tail. The kraken swims in waters untroubled by men's attention. We will rise. We will take the North's coasts and its pride. We will cut the throat of their fat wives and not be ashamed." Asha laughed and did not cover her mouth. "You will be bored," she told him afterward, when the men had gone and there were only 2 Ironborn with a bloodline between them in the room. "They will not fight you because they will be ridiculously polite with their honor when they should be angry. The wolves will send stern letters. They will not come in time to keep their women from cursing your name for a generation. Is that the victory you want?" Balon struck her, a backhand that tasted of salt and old frustration. Asha took the blow and grinned through blood. "I love you too, father," she said, and went out to plan raids because if raids were to be made, she would make them clever rather than wasteful. At Winterfell, Theon stood in the practice yard and let the cold find his bones the way an old hound finds an old master's scent. Bran watched from a chair brought to the sun. "You are quieter than you were when we were boys," Theon remarked, deliberately light. "I am quieter because when I am loud nothing moves that ought to move," Bran said. He had grown so quickly the chair complained when he shifted. He put his fingers on its arms and thought for a heartbeat of a crow stepping from branch to air and not falling. "Robb writes," he added. "Father writes. They will come home when they can." "They will," Theon said, and made himself believe it in that moment. He imagined the sea as if it could change things and moved away from it anyway. Celis Baratheon arrived in the capital with a small retinue and a large opinion of hers. Aleph. She brought with her a cadre of Florence who had the same face and the same tendency to sniff at everything. Eddard met her with honor and caution both, and watched as she took rooms in Maegor's holdfast and ordered the servants to cover the 7 with draperies of red cloth. The High Septon went purple when he heard and sent a deputation of lesser Septons to complain. Eddard received them and had them fed and sent them away with their blood pressure lowered. He spoke to Celis in private, and she pursed her lips in a way that looked like a door closing. "The king will be displeased if you allow idols to stand," she sniffed. "The city will be displeased if I allow sermons in its place of bread," Eddard said. "I will not fight a war of icons while winter purses its mouth. If you burn anything in a sept, it will be the last light you see in this city until you depart." Celis raised her hand as if to shield herself from a gust of cold, and then dropped it because defiance looked better without defense. "You are very sure of yourself for a servant," she said. "I am very sure of myself because I have been a servant all my life," he said, and Celis paused, perhaps because she had not expected him to admit it. In a narrow alley off Honeywine Street, a small boy with hair the color of dirty straw passed a slate with a scrawl to a woman who did not look like a woman and went off whistling. The slate came eventually to Varys, who considered its message and carried it to the hand. "A quiet Sellsword with a bald head and a fondness for silence has been hired near the man Gendry's forge. He looks like a man who does what he is paid to do, and his coin smells of the docks, not of the court." Eddard read it and named a corner of his mind danger. He told Bywater to set a trap for any man who waited without a name near the boy's life. 2 days later Bywater brought him a dagger with a fine edge and no crest stamped on the hilt. "Your nameless man bit his own tongue," he observed. "Then another man bit it for him. Would you like me to have their corpses displayed with a pretty ribbon?" "No," Eddard said. "Burn them quietly. Tell the city at large that housebreaking is a poor trade just now." At the same time, word came from Dorne, slow and precise the way a scorpion moves. Prince Doran wrote, "Sunspear does not forget Elia, but Sunspear has learned to let the sun set without swearing vengeance every evening. You have named the mountain a criminal. We have hungered for that name on a paper with a seal. If you send him to me in chains, we will feed your men with our oranges and our patience." Eddard wrote back with careful honor, the tone of a man balancing on a beam over a long drop. He promised to name Gregor outlaw in the hand's name again, and to hang any man who sheltered him where River Lord's roads crossed. "Beric will like that," the Blackfish said, when he read the letter and smiled at the idea of a young lord from the Stormlands with lips chapped and a joke in his eye taking the law into woods and hedgerows and making it mean something. "He will be honored to be your order written in blood. He will make a brotherhood of it." "A brotherhood without banners is still a brotherhood," Eddard said, and signed another small note with his wolf at the bottom and sent it by a road a boy could run. Night came down early on certain days and brought with it a chill that reminded the city that it lay at the edge of a larger winter than any it remembered. In the Street of Flower, bakers kept their fires banked as if afraid the air might tire of heat. In the Street of Steel, Tobo Mott worked a billet while Gendry worked too, and sweat rolled down their noses into their mouths and tasted of iron. In the Red Keep, Sansa came to the window when the moon was a coin held up by someone stingy and watched the lights on the river. She did not know what she waited for. Arya crept in an hour later and flung herself down on the bed without being invited. They lay side by side without speaking for a while, their breaths falling into rhythm the way 2 branches move in the same wind. "I miss Winterfell," Sansa said at last. "I miss Nymeria," Arya said, and they were both telling the truth. At sea, Stannis' fleet cut north like a black seam being stitched in a raw cloth. The wind shifted. It smelled of sleet. Melisandre stood on the forecastle with her hands over the rail and her eyes not blinking much. "There is a thing ahead," she said at dawn on the 3rd day. "It is not a man. It is a hunger. We will give it iron." "I will give it men," Stannis said, practical as stones. And then perhaps it will ask for more and I will tell it no. Davos thought of other hungers, of kings, of lords, of boys who had learned to eat harshly, and kept his counsel. He went among the sailors and repeated the things that kept ships afloat. Coil the lines, check the seams, lash the barrels. Men prefer to be busy when afraid. They imagine busyness makes bargains with the sea. They came to Eastwatch on a morning when the frost had painted the world white. The wall reared against the sky like a pronouncement. Stannis stood in his ship's prow and stared at it the way one stares at a mountain one has decided, against both reason and comfort, to climb. On the walkway above, men pulled their cloaks tight around themselves and watched ships that did not come to trade. Cotter Pike met them with his mouth already sour. "You came," he said. "You brought what you said you would. The wildlings will come in a week, or they will come tomorrow, and anyone who tells you he knows is either a liar or too stupid to be frightened. Then we will put men where frightened men will take heart from seeing them," Stannis said. "We will cut down trees and make stakes and build fires. We will kill anything that comes that is not a man and treat men like men if we can." "You will not like what is the difference between those two," Cotter said, but he nodded. And shouted orders and men moved as if pulled by ropes tied to their souls. Jon Snow's breath ghosted in the cold like a thought that did not want to solidify. He watched the king in his iron and the red woman in her attention to nothing in particular, and he wondered if oaths were ropes or wings. He had learned both in a short year. When he slept that night, he dreamed of his father standing beneath a heart tree with no face and saying, "I chose for you, and you must choose." And when he woke he felt a steadiness that did not belong to victory or to relief. The first stinging edge of the wildling host came down like a blown spark. Small, bright, dangerous. A scout on a shaggy pony with hair like a nest and a grin meant to show his bravery to men he did not respect. Then more. Then a press, a wait. Mance Raider's banners wove at the edge of the frost haze like prayers a god loved and ignored at once. There were giants in the dawn. There was something in the tree line that made men's mouths dry. Stannis set his line on hard ground where the wind could not cut them all to pieces. He spoke few words. "Do this, do not do that, do not pursue." Davos went from cohort to cohort with a face the men recognized as one that had not learned how to lie to comfort them. It comforted them anyway. Melisandre stood behind the line and held up a torch, and its flame did not gutter. Men noticed such things and told themselves later it had been nothing. Then they went forward when told. When the wildling rush came, it came as all rushes do, in shouts that could have been curses or love, in the earth's thrum, in the particular intimacy of men meeting with the strength of their arms and the weakness of their fear. Jon stood on the wall and watched and thought it looked like a score being written with knives. Arrows raced. Shields rang. The bones of pine trees disturbed the air as if waiting to be useful as pyres. A giant fell with a sound like the end of a story. Somewhere on the field, a red-haired woman loosed a shaft and laughed when it found flesh. Somewhere else, a man from the Stormlands who had never seen snow cried because cold had stolen his fingers more evenly than a bad father. Toward dusk, Stannis sent his left forward on the angle he had kept in his head all day, and the line bent, and then the wildling press broke like surf that had misjudged rock. They held. That was all. It did not feel like triumph. It felt like a man who had been drowning had been dragged up by his armpits and coughed, and would be told he was lucky later when he discovered he had bruises where the hands had been. At night, Melisandre lit a fire in a pit and looked into it and did not say the name of any god. Davos sat on an upturned boat and blew on his hands and thought of his wife's laugh and of King's Landing and of a boy with Storm in his name asleep somewhere safe because men had chosen to be furtive and brave rather than proper and doomed. In the capital, Celis held her own little court and found it an unsatisfactory toy. She ordered sermons in the palace kitchens and was surprised when cooks turned out to be deaf. She declared that the 7 statues in a small sept near the fish market should be veiled. The next morning a veil was found on a corpse in Gin Alley, and word got to her that this is what the city thought of her pieties. She wrote letters to Stannis that began, "The city mocks the true light and do not end as politely as letters should." Eddard intercepted one and sent back 2. "You will hold the peace. You will leave poor people alone while they eat. If you cannot do these 2 things, you will go to Dragonstone and scold the wind." Celis looked at the hand's letter and hated it more for its reason than she would have for cruelty. Littlefinger presented himself to Eddard on a clear morning with the look of a cat who had slept too near a dog and had learned to keep a certain charming distance. "I have earned nothing," he said. "Which is to say, I am out of my element." "You have earned something," Eddard said evenly. "You are not in chains." "You wound me," Peter said amiably. "But very well. It is better to be unappreciated openly than worshipped secretly and then dropped from a height. I think I will go to the Vale where old loves live. I hear the lady of the airy misses family. She misses the version of family that does not require her to admit she is mortal," Eddard said. "Tell her my wife asks after her and that she must let the boy see daylight. Tell her that if she says a word against the law, I will drop her off that lovely slit of a sky door myself." Peter's eyes glittered with a pleasure he did not bother to hide. "You are a poet, my lord. Perhaps we shall take tea on the airy steps and argue about gravity. It would be a conversation to savor." "When you come down," Eddard said, "you will report to me the number of men she can actually call and how many are only in her dreams. If you bring me a lie, I will know." "You are very good at making threats that will be difficult to fulfill," Peter smiled. "I approve. It makes me nostalgic." He left the city for the Vale with 2 carts, for guards, and more schemes than could be tied down. Varys watched him go from a window and hummed a tune no one had sung for 100 years. There were good days in the city after that no one would write songs about. The fishmongers did not cheat more than usual. The butchers kept their blocks clean. Men hung new signs over old shops and forgot the old names. Sansa learned to braid bread for the kitchens and found she liked the way dough became obedient under her hands. Arya discovered she could fall and smile at once. Ser Barristan broke a boy's pride with a wooden sword and then helped him pick it up again. Gendry hammered out a breastplate whose curve a sellsword ran his palm over as if it were the back of a lover. The Hound disappeared one morning just like that, leaving a helm and a bad SME. Ll of wine. Eddard made a small note of grief for a man who had learned to despise his own appetite and then dismissed it because there were 1,000 living men to think of. Word came then of krakens on the stony shore and at Deepwood Motte. Small bites taken by raiders, not a feast yet, but a table set. The ravens brought it as if delighted to have anything clear to say. Eddard stood in the map room with Catelyn and traced the line of the coast with a finger that remembered the way water draws maps on a man's skin when he falls in. "He could be worse," he said. "Balon could have struck when Robb was far and our men were hungrier." "He is still Balon," Catelyn said. "He will not stop because our courtesy asks him to." Eddard wrote to Robb and to Maester Luwin and to Ser Roderick Castle, and in his letters there was an iron he did not sweeten. He wrote, "Hold Moat Cailin. Strengthen the causeways. Send ravens to White Harbor. Ask Lord Manderley for ship's crews. Warn Lady Meage at the Mormont Isle that we will come if she calls, but that she must first close her fist." He wrote to Balon Greyjoy, "You dishonor the peace we have brokered. If you withdraw and ask pardon, I will accept the apology for the sake of men who must fish another day. If you do not, I will take your daughter and your son and hang them by their ankles from your own halls." He did not send the last letter. He put it in a drawer and took out the one that would do instead and sent it with a king's seal because Stannis had told him before he left, "Use my name when it will help, use yours when it will not," and had meant it. In Casterly Rock, Cersei stood in a room that had watched her be a girl and a woman and something else and listened to Tywin tell Mace Tyrell what dowry would come with her sweet boy when he married Marjorie. "It will be a small ceremony," Tywin said. "There is no need to offend the king by trumpeting what he will consider a rival court. We will dress the child like a prince and teach him not to mention the crown in his prayers. He will be instructed to ask the gods for better manners." Cersei watched Marjorie's hands. They were pretty and clever. She imagined cutting them off, one by one, and letting the rose learn to love its thorns alone. She smiled instead. "You will find," she said to Lady Olenna when the Queen of Thorns came to sit with her in a garden that had been taught the trick of blooming underground, "that this house is unlike yours." "All houses are alike," Olenna said dryly. "The men think they built them. The women make sure they don't fall down when the men bang their heads on their own lintels. Your father is efficient. Your boy Joffrey is monstrous. Your Tommen is sweet. I prefer sweet. Monstrous grows boring. Cersei did not reach out to slap the old woman because old women had a way of shifting just enough to turn a slap into comedy. Your granddaughter thinks to be queen again, she said. My granddaughter thinks to survive, Olenna said, and picked a bud that would have been a flower by noon. Jaime Lannister learned to like the cold. He liked that it did not flatter him. He liked that it did not care. He stood atop the wall one night with Jon Snow and looked out over a land that did not need men. I used to think glory was a horse you could ride if you needed to arrive dry, he said, breath pluming. Turns out it's a robe that doesn't keep you warm and makes you look ridiculous. Jon smiled. I never wore anything that made me look less ridiculous, he said. You are a polite boy, Jaime said. You will be a boring man. That will keep you alive. Try it. They stood in silence a while. The stars were bright as accidents waiting to be given meaning. Somewhere below, a fire popped. On the far side, something moved that made neither of them speak for a long count. When Jaime finally said, I killed the king because he begged for his life, Jon did not ask which king. I am sworn to life now, Jaime added. It's difficult. Life is not as grateful as death. Neither is honor, Jon said softly. No, Jaime agreed, and for once there was no jest in him at all. On the third morning after the first clash with Mance's outriders, the wildling horn sounded from the woods, 3 long notes spaced with an unkind patience. Men on the wall stiffened. Men at Eastwatch put hands to ropes with the competence fear gives. Stannis tightened his jaw. You will hold your men, he told Cotter Pike, who scowled and nodded. We will not run forward to be heroes. We will not be made fools by our own fear. If the others come, we will burn what needs to be burned and pray to any god who hears us. If men come, we will kill them or take them prisoner. I do not intend to feed Mance Raider's camp with 30 of my best men because one of them wanted to carve his name. Cotter said, You have the right of it, for a lord. He shouted, and the east gate rattled up, and men moved like oiled machinery. The day was a long bruise. It did not break. At dusk, the sky turned a color Davos would later call iron blood. Melisandre stood with her torch and did not whisper any names. Stannis looked at the dark as if it were a rival and would get bored if ignored. On the wall, Jon saw a shape that disturbed his heart and did not say what shape it was. Jaime saw nothing and said so, and in saying it, somehow comforted men who had wanted lies more than clarity. In King's Landing, that same dusk, a raven arrived with a feather missing and a look on its face like a man who has run farther than he thought he could. Eddard read the message and closed his eyes a moment. Said, We have held. For now. The night is not empty. The day is full. Send wool and oil and men who do not drink. He called in the stewards and set them to counting candles and barrels. He sent Bywater to the Street of Sisters to impress any man without a trade into the work of cutting and seasoning wood. He sent Varys to the poorer septs to ask for ale and small cloths and promises to pray for men whose names would not be known. He sent Pycelle to his bed. Later, in the quiet that comes after orders have been given and before the consequences of them present themselves, Catelyn came to him with her hair bound in a knot that announced she was not to be toyed with and put a hand to his chest. You are thinner, she said as an accusation. I have misplaced certain comforts, he said. Find them, she said. You cannot keep the city on your bones alone. He smiled, the first free smile of that day, and kissed her palm. I will eat when the children do, he said. The children are all around you, she said. They are stupid and stubborn and afraid and brave and hungry and too proud. Eat now, or I will have the cook bring a tray so large it offends your honor. He laughed then, and the laugh felt like discovering he could still run. Sansa lay in her bed and listened to the city breathe and, because the city is always a mirror of men's breath, she heard hope and fear both. She whispered a prayer she had written herself without a Septon's help. Let them not be brave and die for songs. Let them be brave and live. Arya turned over and muttered in her sleep a word Sansa did not know, the kind of word a man would think a soldier would say when his boot came off without tearing his skin. Far west, in a high room in Casterly Rock, Myrcella sat with a book of needlework patterns in her lap and did not look at it. Marjorie sat beside her, hands idle for once. "Do you think King Stannis is wicked?" Myrcella asked. "I think kings are men," Marjorie answered, and stroked a strand of the child's hair. "Men are sometimes wicked and sometimes not. I think men like your uncle can be both and not trouble themselves over which they are being. I think your mother loves you." "She loves Joff," Myrcella said. Not resentful, simply accurate. "She loves Tommen. I think she loves herself. It is hard to be loved by someone who is always more interesting to themselves than you are." Marjorie laughed softly, startled and delighted. "You will be a queen," she said. "Perhaps not of a country, perhaps of your own mind. That is a crown men cannot take away." The knife-quiet days came, in which the most notable event in the capital was a cart overturning on Ragman's Lane and spilling dyes that made the cobbles look for a week as if a peacock had died there. Eddard took comfort in the boredom like a man sucking marrow from a bone. He kept the city potted, watered, pruned, all the small labors that make large evils fail to flourish. Then a messenger from the Trident arrived with a banner ragged as a beggar's pride, and Eddard read a letter in the language of war. Walder Frey had let ironmen cross at Seaguard with small boats in a fog that kept the eyes of duties shut. They had burned outlying crofts and taken women and turned back when men gathered to oppose them. Robb had ridden toward the coast with men who would go for him anywhere. The sea had laughed and pulled little boats where it wished. In the Vale, a bird came with Peter Baelish's neat hand across it. "The Lady of the Eyrie is a storm in a bottle that has broken. I will tie the boy to his lessons if you will give me leave to tie his mother to a chair. She will not listen to reason. I am bored by the thought of having to push her through the moon door. It lacks art." Eddard snorted despite himself and sent back a letter that said only, "Do not kill family." He wrote to Wyman Manderley to ready ships and set harpoons and chains for ironborn noses. He wrote to Lady Meage Mormont to take their scouts and make the islands bristle. He wrote to Theon Greyjoy, "I know where you sleep. Choose well." Theon read the letter and went for a walk in the cold until his teeth stopped wanting to chatter with things he could not say. At the wall, a white shape moved among the trees like the memory of snow. Jon saw it, or thought he had, and did not tell anyone because he had learned in a short year that names can make some things come nearer. Jaime practiced daily until he had blisters beneath callus, as if he could build a new person by tearing the old one and letting Scar do the craftsman's work. Sam turned a page and thought about ravens, about how their cleverness came from hunger. Stannis stood before a brazier and allowed Melisandre to speak to him in low tones. He did not answer. "The dark will come again," she said. "You will hold. You must hold. A king holds when the wind wants to make him a reed." "I am not interested in the wind," Stannis said. "I am interested in whether the stakes are deep enough." "They are," she said, smiling without her mouth. And for once he heard the meaning in her words and kept the satisfaction from showing. It snowed that night, a thin dusting blown sideways. Men woke with their beards white and laughed like boys. The laugh skirled along the wall like a bit of music no one would remember afterward. In King's Landing, a wind from the north blew down the river and made the torches on the wall's gutter. Eddard stood in a tower window with Catelyn's hand in his and watched the way that wind made everything seem to lean a little south. "Winterfell is colder," he said. "Winterfell is kinder," she said. "We will go home," he said, not as a promise to tempt fate, but as a statement of intent to which he would nail his own bones if the world asked it of him. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and for a moment they were what they had been. Two young people with a third between them and a brother already dead and a war ahead and a promise that had looked then like a road. They stayed like that until one of them remembered the next task, and then they parted as people part when they expect to find each other again before the day is done. From Dorne to the Neck, from the Iron Islands to Eastwatch by the sea, small fires burned. Some were meals, some warnings, some prayers. Somewhere across a sea, a girl with white hair whispered to something that had begun to answer her in heat. In a house in King's Landing that had once been a whorehouse and now was a place men came to talk where they thought no one listened, a man with a faint smile traced a path on a map with one finger and then with a knife and thought about a boy some called a prince. Varys sat in his chambers and cut his toenails and did not hum. Celis Baratheon wrote another letter and tore it before the sand dried. The High Septon ate and drank and told himself he had stilled blasphemy by refusing to look at it. And in the Tower of the Hand, Eddard Stark closed another ledger and put the key down again exactly where it had been the night duty had told him to sin. He went to the window and stood looking at the river's slow curl under the stars. He thought of his father and of a younger self standing in a different tower in a different spring with a sword too heavy and a heart that had not yet had to be taught to compromise. He smiled, a little, as a man does when he recognizes his own footsteps years later and finds that the road has not, after all, run out. He was tired, and he would be tired tomorrow and the day after that. There would be judgments to give and bread to count and letters to write and fires to sit beside without letting them tempt him into imagining they were gods. He did not mistake the quiet for peace. He accepted it as armistice. He would pay for it and ask others to pay and try to make the payments small. A raven beat at the shutter. He let it in. It left 3 black marks on the sill where its claws had scrabbled. He unrolled the message and read it twice. It was Jon's hand, clumsy and improving, and it said, "Father, he is coming, not Mance, the cold one, the one they whisper is a king. We will hold. Send what men you can. If you cannot, send hope." He smiled because his son had signed his name, and he felt that was an act of war against despair. Then he put the letter down and began to count, in his head first, then aloud, the men he could move and the fires he could tend, and when he had finished counting he began again, because that is what a hand does when the night grows teeth.